In this video, we are going to cover variables. Variables are used to store and manipulate information, which is the core of any programming language. Like many scripting languages, PHP is a typeless language, which means you do not need to define the type of a variable before you assign it. And you can change the variable's type at a whim. To manage variables, PHP uses the special character, the $sign. To define a variable, all you need to do is type the $sign and then the variable's name. You would then, in most cases, want to set that variable to a value as well. The variable names have limitations. They can only use alphanumeric values, both upper and lowercase, as well as the underscore, but it cannot start with a number. It has to start with a letter or an underscore. So this is a valid variable name, and this would not be, as you can see by the IDE not showing it as a proper variable. You can set a variable to any value in many sets of categories. These are Boolean, which have true or false values, commonly evaluated as well. You can set it to a number in multiple scenarios as an integer of positive or negative, as well as defining it in secondary formats. A float, which is a number except it has a decimal value to it, or a floating point number. You can also define it as a string. Here we have two examples of different types of strings, a single quote string literal as well as a double quote with a parsed variable. You can also set it to a function callback, an array. You can also define it as a class or object, or there are some internal systems such as a resource which you in PHP can't alter, but there are built-in PHP functions which then use these resource variables. And we will cover these four later in the tutorial. And you can also set it to what is called a null value, or a non-instantiated value, basically an empty value. There is one thing to cover about setting strings in PHP, which I alluded to. You have two different types of strings. You have a single quote string, which is what is called a literal string. So this is the text that the string will contain, as well as, let's pick one of the variables up here. Let's go with our int1 or 42. So this is a string literal, which means this is a $sign in the string and an I and a 1 and a comma. The only one that is not quite a string literal is the single quote, and to get that in there you have to do a / single quote. But any of the other backslashes are considered single backslashes. There is no escaped characters in a single quote string except for the single quote. Whereas in a double quote string, which is a parsed string in PHP, we can pass variables. So this string will actually have the number of the int1, equals. We can also have special characters here, single backslash will show up as a single backslash, or we could have a double backslash would escape. So we could do a backslash r \n, which is a new line, and it will parse special characters into a double quote string, whereas a single quote string will not parse variables or special characters. To get variables into a single quote string, we have a tool and capability, which is a concatenation function, which we'll cover earlier. 1 is int 1, which then parses that variable into the string. Because of initial construction of PHP and how some of the architecture was laid out, I will be using single quote strings almost exclusively, due to both readability, because it can parse the variable, whereas inside the string it doesn't get parsed as easily in most IDEs, and it's easier to recognize what you're working with. This is the end of the variables video. In the next video, we are going to cover operators.